and that is at this point, I would like to introduce to us our guest speaker, who is by name Ude Chiziteran Fortune. He is a climate change activist, and he has been very effective, and he has been a strong voice against climate change. He has been a strong voice against climate change and impact of climate change. He is the founder of Folly Limited and the president of the Greener Picture. All these are climate change innovations and organizations focus on how to utilizing green energy and seeing how to make sure that there is net zero emission. So I'd like to leave the floor open for him now to carry on at this point. So you're welcome, sir. You're welcome. You're welcome, sir.
Hello, Francis. Thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here this evening. And like I told you when we met earlier, a couple of days back, wherever we are gathered to talk about, green energy, energy transition, sustainable development, call me any day and any time. And I'll be willing and very glad to join in the conversation. So I'm really excited to be here this evening. And hello everybody, good evening. And I hope everybody can hear me so that we wouldn't have to. I hope my audio is very clear. If you have any issues on my audio.
Yeah, we can hear you, sir.
Right? Okay. And my sincere apologies for not being able to present. I had a few hitches that prevented me from finishing up most of the slides. So I would talk later with Francis, and then we'll see how we'll be able to pass the slides along to the participants later on, maybe after the webinar. Happy World Earth Day to everybody. It's a beautiful and a very amazing day for climate change and climate justice, because the World Earth Day somehow, kind of reminds us that we have to pay a lot of attention to protect the Earth, because like we say in many of our organizations, we just have one Earth and it's our singular home, regardless of our exploitation in Mars and other planets. This is the one place we can be able to call home. So happy World Earth Day to each and every one of us here. And I will dive straight into the topic and the theme we have today. So I would like to confirm again if there is anybody struggling to hear me, so that we don't go back and forth with the problem of audio. And in absence of any response, I think I'll just go ahead with the presentation. So the need to transition from fossil energy to green energy for sustainable development. It's really beautiful and necessary for us to understand critically where we are at the moment when we talk about fossil fuel dependency. So we are at a point where fossil energy is at the center stage of global energy consumption. And even in Nigeria here, it is even worse, because majority of what we do in this country is guided and driven by fossil fuel and carbon intensive sources of fuel. So when we talk about a transition from this fossil energy to green energy, we're talking about a movement from this carbon intensive sources of energy to less carbon intensive sources, renewable and sustainable sources. So when we say that the world, or Nigeria, let's use Nigeria as a particular point of focus. When we say Nigeria is largely fossil dependent, we're not really throwing words around for the fun of it, because we are the third highest emitter of greenhouse gas in Africa, just behind South Africa and Zambia. And as at 2021, we are solely responsible for about 0.97% of greenhouse gas emissions in the world. Now, although it's basically relatively small, I mean, if you compare it to the facts and to the figures from the cement industry or the aviation industry, it looks pretty much insignificant. But in truth, our impact as a nation is far beyond what it should be, considering the level of our sustainable development. Now, I'll make this statement make sense later on in this presentation, but you need to understand that, using these large carbon intensive, sorry, is the comment for me? Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, but there's someone that has not joined.
Okay. So, the fossil dependency in the country currently eats even deeper into our foreign exchange, our government revenue, our domestic consumption, our sources of energy in our industries, the manufacturing sector, and the likes of it. About 60% of our government revenue comes from the fossil fuel industry. And about 90% of our foreign exchange earnings are singularly from the fossil fuel industry. And when I say fossil fuel, I believe most of us here would probably be quite aware of most of these terminologies. I'm talking coal, petroleum, oil shales, natural gas, bitumen, tar sand, and many other heavy oils, even the kerosene that you use. Most of these fossil dependent sources are really, really causing a lot of harm for the country. Now, we are looking at shifting from these carbon intensive sources to other renewable and sustainable sources like wind technology, solar technology, the use of hydrogen, the use of biofuel, the use of geothermal energy, and the use of, even recently, I read a research where scientists have discovered a way to tap energy from droplets, from water droplets around the ocean source. Now, it is very important for us to know that at the moment, we are yet to fully harness the actual potential of renewable energy. So when we're talking about transitioning from fossil energy to green energy, it's more or less a transition to a sector that is so beneficial to our ecosystem and our environment, to the extent that we are yet to fully see how far it can save us as a human race. So at the moment, it is currently really, really beneficial. But at this current level of importance it has, and at this current level of benefit that it provides, we are still at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to how well green energy sources can save us as a society. So we're looking at moving from these carbon intensive sources to green energy sources. So I've been asked plenty times, why exactly are we clamoring for all of this? Why have we dedicated our lives and our time and our attention? Personally, for me, my money, my entire energy into all of this. And I'll tell you one singular reason that I tell people every day: to have a place that we still live in. Because the truth remains that whatever it is that we have done, or whatever it is that we are doing now to affect our environment, somehow comes back around to avidly affect us as a human civilization. But it's really hard to understand when we keep throwing grammar around. So I'll bring it back home, basically. Now, the most important reason why we are looking at a transition is to stop climate change. So the first and most principal reason for the transition is we are looking at putting and nipping climate change in the bud. So when we talk about climate change, we're talking about a change in the levels of carbon and the level of greenhouse gas emissions in our atmosphere. We're talking about the reduction in the level of atmospheric gases. And by atmospheric gases, we mean gases like methane gases, we mean gases like carbon dioxide, we mean gases like CO2 that have permeated into our entire atmosphere and has altered the normal setting of things that we have enjoyed as a civilization. So when climate change comes into perspective, it changes the world as we know it. It changes the rain cycle. It changes the health factors that we are aware of, and it is so vast that recently the United Nations Framework Conventions on Climate Change came out with a research that showed that we are yet to even understand how far we have been affected by our activities, our anthropogenic activities, human-made activities on the planet. So when you want to understand climate change, understand it in this perspective, the weather variations that you're seeing, the fact that we are seeing rainfalls at extremely awkward periods, or the fact that we are seeing high heat waves, or the fact that you step out and the sun is worse than it has been when you are way younger, or the fact that when the rains fall, they fall in a very terrible manner. These particular physical signs that you experience as a person are the core reasons why we are clamoring and we are screaming at the top of our voices that we want a transition from fossil energy to green energy. So when these weather variations happen, they affect food availability. They bring about food shortages. And the level of radiation that the sun gives out today as a result of the depletion of the ozone layer invariably affects our health and affects most of the activities, the natural activities here on Earth. So when you put all these events together and you summarize them into what we have termed already as climate change or the climate change effect, it begins to make you understand why we are pertinent on bringing about a change from using fossil sources to green sources. Now, you know that fossil sources already are one of the largest contributors of these greenhouse gases, while these green energy sources contribute zero to nothing in terms of their greenhouse gas emissions. So when we stop the usage of these fossil dependent sources and switch to the usage of these green energy sources, we reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that is already in the atmosphere. And I feel if you're on this platform, you basically should already know this. But then extend your knowledge to this particular fact. Majority of what we do with fossil and carbon dependent sources do not only affect and increase the amount of greenhouse gases, they also reduce what we call carbon sinks. Now, the environment is naturally designed to be able to absorb and treat majority of the carbon emissions that we are seeing that we would have had on a normal and on a more comfortable pedestal. But then the increase in our fossil activities have reduced the ability of the environment to deal with these gases. So it's not just increasing the gases, it's reducing the ability of the atmosphere to adjust itself and to align itself to be able to continue surviving in the midst of these emissions. So it now brings conventions like the Paris Agreement, where there is an agreement to reduce global temperatures to 1.5 degrees centigrade, to 1.5 degrees Celsius above industry levels. Why? To allow the environment to deal with these gases. So if we continue with fossil fuel sources, we would lose all the sinks. A sink per se is, in relatable terms, things like the trees the ocean bodies, the water bodies, sorry, the oceans, and every other thing or every other source that takes in carbon dioxide and gives out oxygen. It's the natural design that has been put in place to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that is in the atmosphere. So when we continue with the usage of this this fossil fuel, we reduce these things and increase the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. So we are making it more difficult for the Earth to self medicate, if I'll put it that way, to take care of itself while we are living inside. So it is very, very important that you understand this so that you would see how the future is bleak and the future is very, very, very far off if we do not begin to address these things now, and if we do not begin to look at making this transition now. Now, another very important reason is we need to transition because fossil fuel sources are largely exhaustive. Now, oil in the ground can clearly finish. And coal in the ground, for instance, I'm from Enugu, and majority of the places where we have where we had coal factories are no longer in place because most of the reserves that the state had, most of them have depleted terribly. And it's quite useless looking for coal down here in mass quantities. And that's what happens with fossil fuel sources. They are largely exhausted. So when we continue with them, putting the climate change factor aside, continuing with these exhaustive sources is bad because we cannot be able to continue with them because one day they would finish. And when they finish, we'll be left handicapped because we would have a lot of industries that would need to cover up their energy consumption in order to continue the wheels of development and the wheels of supply and demand and the wheels of industry going. So because of the exhaustive nature, we need to make sure that we are focusing our attention on green and renewable sources of energy. Now, another reason is tied directly to the topic. We need to transition for sustainable development. Now, a country is focused and centered on sustainable development when it is embarking on the journey of providing what we would call a high standard of living, or what we would call a comfortable standard of living for its citizens, while remaining well and within the planet's ecological constraints. So it means we are developing our economy, we are developing our society, we are increasing our industries, we are making more roads, we are increasing the number of manufacturing industries, but at the same time, we are doing these things with carbon emission at a check. We're doing these things with our emission levels at a particular percentage that does not harm the environment. So as an activist, you should understand that your cause is not stop the emissions. Rather, your cause is the emissions that are necessary should be done in line with regulations that allow the environment to still be able to deal with these emissions. So while you are cutting down trees, when you cut down one, because it's necessary for building and construction, ensure that you plant 3 or 4 others. When you decide to burn this fossil fuel, ensure that you have carbon capture technology in place to reduce the amount of carbon that gets into the atmosphere. So while we are driving for innovation and sustainability, while we're driving for innovation and economic development, the transition campaign is emphasizing that these things should be done with a limit. It should be done with a constraint in mind that allows us to bring sinks that would reduce the amount of carbon that we are putting out into the atmosphere while we are doing the necessary things needed for development. So we cannot stop our development basically because we want to reduce and cut out emissions. So while we are working on those developmental measures, let us make sure that we are doing those things in line with certain limits, in line with certain ecological constraints, in line with certain regulations, so that we do not begin to put the environment in a position that it cannot recover from. So in the course of doing all this, it is necessary to also understand that majority of our activities, sometimes most of the things that cause these depletions are not only man-made. Some of them are natural. Some of the increase in solar radiations, for instance, that has caused increase in melting ice caps, and also caused increase in heat in so many regions. Some of them are natural causes, because without having to divide these two into anthropogenic, which basically means human-made sources, and natural sources, it would be hard for us to understand what should we stop doing in order to cause the transition. So it's necessary to highlight some of these things are happening on its own, while some of these things are being caused by us human beings. So now that we've understood where exactly should we transition, it is necessary to know what can we do to switch, what can we do to transition, what areas should we focus our attention on. And in all, it's been about 5 years now for me in my climate activism. And one thing I've seen is a lot of people who understand the problem and understand the urgency, but do not really understand the areas that need to be adjusted and the areas that need to be amended. And so I would briefly explain most of them to you now. Now, when we talk about the things we can transition our transportation systems. We can transition to what we call sustainable transportation. Vehicles in Nigeria alone account for more than 65% of fossil fuel emissions. Now, the reason for this increase is because everything revolves around a system of transportation. A manufacturer does not manufacture his products if there is no efficient system of distribution. A manufacturer does not go ahead to do his activities if his raw materials do not go from point A to point B. Cars on the road are increasing by the minute, and people are beginning to jump into vehicles, public transport systems, and the wheel continues and the cycle continues. And we still keep having this fossil dependency. Now, in Lagos, for instance, the establishment of a system like the BRT is one of the major ways that we're recommended for us to transition to what we call sustainable transportation. Now, sustainable transportation is in two facets. One involves the use of central transportation systems, and the other involves the use of electric or EV vehicles that do not consume large amounts of fossil fuel. So either we have a system of transportation that allows a large majority of the population to use a particular, say for instance, the metro line, or to use maybe the BRT, to avoid them getting on their own vehicles and increasing the amount of carbon in society, or using vehicles that are eco-friendly, or vehicles that have a hybrid system. So when we're talking about transitioning, this is one very core area that we can move from using energy-intensive vehicles and switching to vehicles that save and vehicles that promote sustainability, or developing and advancing central transportation systems. In Europe, for instance, the European panel decided that by 2050, vehicles that are consuming fossil fuel will no longer be allowed on their roads. And so many countries are beginning to adopt it. I read once that Canada was looking to make sure that with the same 2050 target, about 90% of the vehicles on their roads will be electronic vehicles. These particular actions are the basic things that we refer to when we're talking about a transition. It's not as bogus as it sounds, it's not as wide as it sounds. They are very basic things that you can pinpoint to. Now, another thing that we can do, another system that we can adopt to bring about transition is increased recycling. Now, many of us do not really understand that the amount of carbon that is being produced, that is being emitted when a single plastic is produced can be prevented. So by the time a company is producing 50,000 tons of plastic, and majority of this plastic production, most of these plastics end up in the sea, or most of this plastic end up in the ground and they're non-degradable, aside from harming their source or harming where they're being dumped, the companies and these industries would still go ahead to manufacture more plastic and, in course, burn more fossil and bring about larger emissions. So when we're looking at recycling, it's also multifaceted. We're looking at stopping the dumping of these plastics in the water bodies, and we're also looking at recycling it so that we don't continue producing tons of plastic every single day. Now, I'll give you a fun fact that scares me every single day. 100% of baby sea turtles today have plastic in their stomach. It's a very scary figure, but about 8 million pieces of plastic make its way into the ocean every single day. 8 million pieces of plastic. And you would think it's a very strange and weird figure, but you'd ask yourself one thing. When I consume my Pepsi or my Coca-Cola or my Mirinda, where exactly do I throw or deposit the plastic? What happens to the plastic when I throw it or deposit it there? Already in Enugu State, for one, there are so many people who have already tapped into gathering plastic for recycling. But the figures are not impressive because the amount of plastic that still goes into the water bodies or that are still found inside, that are still put in landmines is not, it's not impressive. So we are looking at a society where our water bodies are riddled with plastic, a society where our companies are constantly producing the same amount or even increasing amount of plastic on a daily basis. Societies like Germany, for instance, have advanced transitioning by allowing their citizens return plastic. Even in the UK, you return this plastic and you're given 1 or 2 cents. As little as it seems, these are little ways that we can advance a transition from fossil dependency to green energy. It's absurd and it seems basic, but these basic things are the things that help us move step by step from a fossil dependent era to a green society. So when we talk of transitioning, we can also look at increasing carbon sinks. So when we have found out that our activities not only increase the amount of carbon, but reduce the availability of these sinks, our efforts should be directed towards increasing these sinks and making sure that whosoever is going ahead to cut down our trees turns around and plants even more. So that we'll be able to see increase in carbon sinks that would allow us to continue to enjoy clean and fresh air and reduce the impacts of fossil fuels in our society. So when sustainable development comes side by side with the need for a transition, it begins to look like we're talking about putting panels on every rooftop, or we're beginning to look at putting a biodigester in every sewage system. And in truth, those things will help. But the actual activities that can give us an edge are these little programs that can be able to help reduce what has already been caused by the current status quo of fossil dependency. So this clarion call to transition from fossil energy to green energy is very basic and very simple. And we can only do most of these things when we are aware and when we are practical about our involvement. So we are not just looking to learn about these things and talk about these things, but we're also looking at being very practical about how we approach most of these things. So the need to transition is broad. It's very, very vast. Aside the climate change effect, and aside the fact that fossil fuel is exhaustive, there is also the need for us to transition because current use and current dependency on fossil fuel has not really done us any good in terms of energy access. So majority of our energy sources today are centered around petroleum, oil and gas, and natural gas. And you would find out that a whooping figure of about 85 million Nigerians are unable to, do not have access to electricity. And about 176 million Nigerians do not have access to clean cooking. And these scary figures are existent because our dependence on fossil fuel has received zero attention from the necessary parastatals that they should get attention from. So these little things we can do, and these very practical steps we can take, can help us contribute in our own little way to this transition. And I am really glad that we're making initiatives like this to allow us to understand why we should transition and how we can transition and how exactly to benefit us in our quest for sustainable development. And so I'll close with this very brief sentence. The earth is ours, yours and mine, and majority of our activities are tied to the environment, whether we like it or not. So the transition and the need for a transition is not just something we clamor to the big leagues and the big players. It's also something that we as ourselves, we as individuals should also come to understand and we should also come to embrace. And I'm really, really hoping that we would also be able to carry this message and this gospel to other people in our environments while we embrace it for ourselves as individuals. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, sir, for that very insightful and really top-notch expose on the need to transition from fossil energy consumption to green energy. There's a clarion call. There's a need to, contribute massively to sustainable development in various sectors and in various activities we embark on. Because the earth is we have only one earth, and it is our responsibility to protect the earth. All right, thank you so much, sir. We are so glad for that. That was really, really impactful. Due to time constraints, because we have two more speakers on the line and we don't have a lot of time, we don't have a luxury of time. We are actually, time is way ahead of us. So we'll take just two questions before we move on to the next session. Two questions. So please, if you have your question, do well to unmute your mic and ask. Just two people are given the slot to ask their questions. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Emmanuel Okafu. I'm talking from Oka. So while he was making his own contribution, he made mention of a situation where if persons or anybody want to carry out the burning of fossil fuel or burning in general, they should have a technology in place, a technology that will ensure that the environment is not adversely affected by that activity. He mentioned also that if trees have to be culled, 3 trees should be planted in place of the one that is to be cut as a means of compensating the environment. So, but what I want to have more light thrown on is the issue of having a technology in place to mitigate the effect of the burning or fossil fuel. I would like more light to be thrown on that. I don't know what kind of technology is there currently technology to this effect, or it is a proposal for maybe some kind of technology to be invented for that purpose. I just want to know.
There is a technology. It's called carbon capture and storage technology. So briefly, it involves the capturing of carbon, and in most cases, the reinjection of this carbon into the earth. So I believe you probably know what geothermal energy is all about. Geothermal energy involves energy from the earth crust, basically. So the heat that is being formed on the ground, in most cases, are being harnessed in so many areas and used as energy sources. So carbon capture and storage involves capturing this carbon dioxide right from the source of where they are being emitted and re-injecting it into the ground, or storing most of them and transporting them to certain locations and re-injecting them into the ground in those locations. So these technology already exist, and there's even an agency. There's an agency with their headquarters in Germany, Carbon Credits and Carbon Capture Society. So they are in charge of monitoring the deployment of this technology in places like the United States. And United States, Australia, Singapore, these are nations that have adopted, Norway, are nations that have adopted these carbon capture technology. So it exists, and it's not really native to Nigeria. Currently, we have a lot of gas flaring going on, and basically nobody listens to the call for carbon capture, but it exists already. And we are hoping strongly that because of how carbon intensive our oil and gas industry is, that we would be able to adopt this in the country. But we're still really banging at the door of the government parastatals. But we'll see what goes on. But yes, it exists, and it's already in place in many places in the world today.
Okay. It seems this technology is available to big organizations, not necessarily, let's say, for home use or stuff.
Yes, it's available to. It's really, really expensive, and most of the activities in houses and homes can easily be mitigated. So, for instance, your generator can be replaced with solar panels or inverters. But most of these industries, it's almost too necessary. The rate of energy they need, the capacity, the amount of energy they need will not really be sufficient if it's provided by solar panels or wind turbines. So they need to burn fossil fuel. So it's a must for them. So these technologies have not yet been adopted. Like I said earlier, we have not fully harnessed. We are just at the tip of the iceberg. So I believe that with time, we'll be able to develop a technology that can allow us to trap and re-inject domestic carbon sources. So, but currently, it's only available for big industries because it's believed that local domestic sources can easily switch to mitigate their carbon emissions.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, please, one more question and we're good to go. Please, we don't have time.
Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
Yeah, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, we can hear you.
Okay, my name is Benjamin. The guest speaker said something about recycling of plastics. And I asked someone this question one other time. If there are companies in Enugu states or people in Enugu states who are into recycling, because for me, I believe we should encourage our youths, to collect this plastic waste and remit to companies instead of just allow this waste lie, everywhere. We can, if there's a way for us to encourage these youth, encourage people around us to gather these plastic waste instead of throw them away. It could also be another source of employment, to people. So if there are companies out there that are into recycling of plastics and probably other materials that can be recycled, I mean, we can help share them and sensitize people about this. For me, it's another step forward in the fight for a better climate.
Okay, so like I said earlier, I am really all about practical steps that can be done. If we had enough time, I would have also given you places where you could find other sources. But I am very sure of a particular company. It's called Recycle Point. So maybe you could just go on Google and search Recycle Point. It's a company in Lagos, but then they have what is called the iRecycle Network. So you can contact them and they would put in place measures for you to transport your plastic from Enugu here to them in Lagos for a fee. They adopt a system where they give you remunerations, give you little incentives, like they pay you for your plastic. So I know about two others, but I really cannot verify how well they operate outside Lagos and Abuja. But I'm very certain Recycle Point. So just Google Recycle Points Limited, and you would see their contact details, their options for volunteer sign up, and the iRecycle network. Then you can work with them there. The other people I'm aware of in Enugu, for one, deal with they deal with very local and remote collection and recycling. So I don't really think you're very comfortable working with them. But then they don't really have very easy points of contact, and it's really difficult getting across to most of them. I've tried on some occasions, but the one I can assure you of is Recycle. Just go on Google and look for Recycle Point Limited, and I think you'll be able to take it up from there. I think you'll be able, in a couple of days, you'll be able to get your plastic over to them to recycle and send back a product to you if you want, or pay you off for the plastic.
All right. Thank you so much, sir, for the.
No problem. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very
We
much
really
for having
appreciate.
me. Yeah, it was a huge pleasure speaking to you guys, and I hope we can connect later on and talk even more on all of this. Yeah, thank you.
All right, it's a pleasure, sir. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. All right, we'll move on now to the next phase of the webinar, and that is the next speaker, who is going to throw more light on sustainable energy, and also what we need to know about sustainable consumption. So she's also going to talk about renewable energy and sustainable economy as well. So we have her here. She is a recent graduate, SDSN climate actor, and she's also a climate advocate. She has actually led a lot of innovation on climate change. So we're glad to have here in our midst Jennifer Abo. So she's going to take the floor now for the next presentation. All right, she's already here. So over now to you, next speaker. Thank you so much.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Jennifer Abo. Just like Francis said, I'm a recent graduate of economics, and I'm excited to learn more about climate change, and that is why I'm here today. Francis, please, can you help me and share my slides? All right, okay, I will start now. So Mr. Chizidem has almost said, he exhausted the entire topic. I wasn't expecting him to go, though, to be so detailed. So it's as if what I'm saying, I might be saying what he had previously mentioned. So, but I'm kind of summarizing and being more specific, I would say. So there's a recent report by United Nations about fossil fuel being the largest greenhouse gases, one of the greenhouse gases in existence. And they reported that over 75% of global greenhouse gases is caused by CO2. And this is very detrimental because there are so many, it leads to global warming and climate change, of which Mr. Chiziter mentioned earlier. So one of the effects of climate change, for those who are not yet aware, is that it can lead to droughts, flood, reduction in agricultural production, so many effects, rising sea level, and so on and so forth, things we don't need to achieve. So it's very clear that there must be a transition for the use of fossil fuel to renewable energy. So what exactly are these?
Sorry. Can you see the slide?
No, I'm not. But I'm just going ahead.
Okay, I've been trying to share, but all right. You can go on. Let me keep.
Yes. Yes. So what exactly are the renewable
You can go on.
energy? Yes, I know. I believe you must have heard that already, but I'm trying to re-emphasize. So this renewable energy, the energy we derive from natural sources that can be replenished at a very high rate, even more than the rate the consumption rate. So, however, and this renewable energy from the slide, you can see it includes wind energy, solar energy, geothermal energy, hydro energy, and so on and so
Can you say
forth.
it now? Sorry.
Yes, I can. I can. So
Okay,
thank
all
you.
right.
But those renewable energy are those ones that can deplete over time. For instance, if you notice in the 1970s, they had in Nigeria, they had of crude oil, they were able to have high national income, high domestic products. Nigeria even became the giant of Africa because they had abundance of oil. But currently, we have issues in the international market price of oil because the oil is exhausting. Like it's very limited. So we cannot keep on depending on fossil fuels. There must be a transition. When I'm talking about sustainable economic growth, which is the bone of contention for this presentation. We say that growth is sustainable if the existing population desire are fulfilled or met without undermining the ability of the upcoming generations to meet their own necessities. So it means if we can achieve our own economic needs or wants and still leave enough resources for the generations to come, it means that we have a sustainable, we are growing sustainably. So, and that is not the case for Nigeria. I will always be citing crude oil. So when crude oil was discovered, we had a lot of oil, but now what is happening is already going down, and we can't keep on depending on oil. Nigerians, because I'm coming from an economic point of view, so everything I'll be saying will be towards the economy. The economy of Nigeria is stagnant. There is no diversification because we are dependent on these non-renewable energy sources. So there must be transition. Again, it's even interesting to know that Nigeria is blessed with an abundance of renewable energy. But then we are yet to harness the potentials that can come from this renewable energy. So when I'm talking about potentials, if Nigeria is to invest in renewable energy, it might lead to industrialization, higher economic growth, even more health facilities. It can translate to so many positive effects. I'll still come to that later. Despite we're not able to harness these potentials because we are constrained. We have a lot of obstacles that we need to settle before we can fully invest into renewable energy. And some of them, there is people are not
Please, you're having
Hello?
Hello, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you still hear me?
Hello?
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
We can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Please go on, we can hear you. Hello, are you there? Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Sorry. Okay, so I was saying that we know that in Nigeria, energy is important to every country economy, but in Nigeria's case, it's even more crucial because Nigeria is one of the most populated country in the world, meaning that as population is growing, the demand for energy is growing. So, and the energy sources we currently have are not reliable, they are not sustainable. They would one day be exhausted. Not just that, in addition, they contribute to the greenhouse gases emission, which can lead to so many effects. So we must transition, just like Mr. Chizitere initially pointed out. Why renewable energy? Why? I said I will be more specific. So renewable energy in terms of economy of Nigeria has put a lot of pressure on economic growth and development. Nigeria has been reporting increases in GDP, but then is not translating into economic development. And this is because they're relying more on, sorry about the background noise, they're relying more on fossil fuel. So, and again, there is continuous depletion of energy resources, like I have said. So we need to replace the renewable energy. Another one is unstable oil prices in the international markets, increasing demand to reduce carbon footprints. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
So okay, now I've been mentioning there is need for renewable energy. So what are the actual benefits of renewable energy to the economy? If you look at my slide number 7, I mentioned that they have longer lifespan. The solar energy are known to last for more than 15 years. And this can lead to cost effectiveness for any economy. Oil can be very costly compared to this renewable energy. So another reason is renewable energy has different sources, which opens ground for economic diversification. So the country can decide to invest in so many sources instead of relying just on fossil fuel in the case of like non-renewable energy. Another one is an opportunity for the financial sector and the rest of them. It's it can lead to, it has longer supply value chain. So when I mean by longer supply value chain, so the value from this renewable energies transcends to so many sectors. So and so on and so forth. It can lead to circular economy when it comes to recycling the products, the plastics and the rest of the things we are using. Then people service in the sense that it creates a lot of employment opportunities for people. Can earn So now we have known that we know that these renewable energies are beneficial to the economy, but how can we contribute to it? How can we individuals, maybe private companies, government agencies can contribute to renewable energy? So for the individuals, what we can actually do is we can start using energy efficient light bulbs. So instead of using, there are light bulbs that take more energy. There are bulbs that take more energy. We can decide to use the light bulbs in our homes. Another one is we can use solar powered water heating system instead of the conventional one we use in our homes. You can dry your clothes under the sun than using clothes dryers for people that have that, and also people that use washing machine to wash. So you can decide to wash it by hand. So all these things will help to reduce the amount of energy you use in your home. When you're not in your home, you can off your electrical appliances in order to reduce the amount of energy you consume. Another one is just like Mr. Chizita mentioned earlier, if you can try to join public transport to reduce the amount of cars on the way emitting CO2. So you can try to join public transport and leave your car. And if you must drive your car, there are cars that use ethanol. So I'm not a science student, so I don't know much about all this. But then I heard that there are electric cars, there are cars that use ethanol. If it is affordable and it's something you can do, you can try to also look into that. Then one of the problem of renewable energy in Nigeria is that a lot of people do not know about it. So you can educate your neighbor. Since you now know, you can educate your neighbor. Try to buy solar systems. Educate them on the importance of its use and so on and so forth. For private sectors, they can decide to diversify, look into digitalization, combining technology with most of their activities. So for government, I think most of the responsibilities rest on the government because the private sector and both individuals can't achieve this without the government coming into play. These renewable energy technologies are very costly and expensive. So the government must come in with reduction in tax and subs and also increasing subsidies for this. Wow. I'm so sorry about that. So sorry, don't mind the background noise. So the government must come in to increase subsidies and reduce tax on this on this technology so that it can be affordable to people. They will have to implement policies, they will have to initiate projects to encourage individuals and private companies to harness into the opportunities of renewable energy. More specifically, the United Nations have stated those 5 specific things the government of each country should start doing. They should make renewable energy technology a global public good, like in the sense that there should be no intellectual property rights attached to any renewable energy. So this is why you can see that solar systems are becoming cheaper. Even poor people can purchase solar systems and keep in their houses. I can remember 10 years ago, it was not possible. So they are already taking strategies to achieve these 5 options given by the United Nations Conventional Framework for Climate Change. Now, they should also improve access to components and raw materials needed for implementing these renewable energy technologies in their community. So they should level the playing field for renewable energy technologies. They should ensure that they implement favorable domestic policies to attract foreign direct investments, to attract investors in their countries, investors that would look into establishing more renewable energy technologies in their country. Now they should give loans, they should give grants to individuals willing to take up opportunities as well. Now they should triple the investment they personally as the government have been making. Now, generally, it's good to know that Nigeria government is already taking possible steps. After the COP26 conference they had at Glasgow, they have pledged, they have like made commitments to see that they reduce the global their emission to net zero, to net zero emission before 2020, 2060. And they have already started implementing projects that have been implementing policies. If you look at my slide 8, you can see potential investment they have made, like these are broad investments that they are calling individuals to look into and see how they can start from somewhere. They can and see what they can do with this potential investment. So they have 6 locations where they found sugarcane fuel ethanol, and this is a potential renewable energy that can help in Nigeria. So because most countries, we do hear that geothermal, hydro, wind energy, solar energy, and so on and so forth are part of renewable energy. But then countries are endowed differently. For instance, in Nigeria, we do not have most of this renewable energy. So we must find alternatives to them, to those ones we don't have. So these are like potential renewable energies we have in Nigeria: cassava fuel, oil palm, biodiesel in Calabar, and so on and so forth. So government has identified all this and are calling people to look into it. ExxonMobil and some companies are already working on the left-hand side of the slide. If you can see it, the pipeline of gases running from Akwa Ibom to different locations in Nigeria. Some companies have already started looking into that investment, while they're also calling on others to look into the other part of investment. And so many things the government of Nigeria is currently doing to promote renewable energy. So I would stop here because there are so many aspects of renewable energy, and this is just what I have to say. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much for that very insightful presentation. Um, that was actually really cool. But sorry to say that we don't really have enough time to take questions again, because this meeting is supposed to end by 10. But time check, you can see that we are just very close to the end of the webinar, and we still have one more speaker. So I would like to call on the next speaker to take the floor to make our presentation now. And she is also a UN SDSN climate actor here in Enugu. She is also a climate change activist, and she has been making meaningful social impacts, driving impact and innovation around sustainable environment, and also mitigating climate change and to curb pollution and mitigate biodiversity loss. So she's right here with us, and I'd like to call her to take the floor. Her name is Francisca Ede. Francisca Ede, you're welcome. Please can take the floor for your presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good evening. You will say you are introducing another speaker. The speakers are finished. That time we are finished. What else are we still speaking? Okay, I'm Francisca Ede. I'm also a member of the CAAP Enugu. So I wouldn't say much because I think we just have 16 minutes to go. And then the first speaker and the second speaker spoke well, so I don't think we have much to say. But then I'll be coming from the gender aspect, the effects of fossil fuels on women, right? As a gender advocate, I'll be speaking from that side. Let's take a different thing, because we've spoken so much about how we can transition to that without relating it to individuals now. And I want to focus on women. So types of fossil fuels include oil, petroleum, coal, and all of that. And then looking at this, I think it has more effect on women than it has on men. This is not a gender war, please. So it has more effect on women than men. Women are prone to be affected by this fossil fuels than men. So some of the things that it causes for women are premature birth. There was a time, sometime last year, when our organization, Lift Humanity, went to Port Harcourt, I think precisely a city called Bodo. where there is burning of fossil fuels, like all these oil companies in Cross River and all of that, they're burning wells, there were oil spillage. And then they were interviewing them like, what's the effect of this? Has this caused any harm? And then from that, we discovered that it mostly affects women. They say their women, have premature births, has infertility, high risk of pregnancies. Their farms are being destroyed because there is oil spillage everywhere. So this is what we suffer around here. And the funny part is that we envy them because we say there are a lot of oil companies there. When you go there, you get job and all of that. But they are highly affected by all these things. And they do not even know that they are affected to these things. So that's where much awareness comes, because solutions to these things aside awareness are very in the sense that I am very sure that among the speakers that spoke, none of us might have innovations on how to tackle this transition now. So we are still waiting for people who have innovation to come up with it and help us. So the only solution we can much render is enlightening these people, because they are the ones who give out their lands for all of this, for burning of fuels, and they think they're going to make so much money by giving it to these oil companies to come and burn fuels and all of that. And they end up endangering their own health. It ends up causing their women to have high risk of pregnancies, premature births, malaria, poor eyesight, because there are smokes everywhere. Now we know that when you come to cigarette sachet, they will write smokers are liable to die young. Why? Because of the smoke coming from the cigarette. Right? But now, virtually all of us smoke because they are burning of fuels everywhere. They are burning of plastic everywhere. They are burning of fossil fuels virtually everywhere. So that means all of us are liable to die young. But then it affects women more. It affects women more in terms of reproduction, that's fertility. Because should I say, of all the population of the world are coming from women, that everybody virtually came out from a woman. So if it's affecting the fertility of women, that means all of us are affected, because this is where everybody is going to come out from. So if this woman is infertile because of climate change, that means very soon you will hardly find human beings on Earth. So there is need for us to advocate more for this fossil fuel transition, in as much as we don't have much solutions to render now. The best we can do is advocacy. Like in Enugu now, I know there is a place around 9th Mile where they burn some of these plastics, like S1, the place they take all these things to is somewhere around 9th Mile. Then thank God that place is deserted, because if it were close to somebody's house, just like in those cross rivers where they will give out their land, not because in their mind, hey, all you company people are going to give us so much money, but they're endangering their own health. So if we could take this awareness so wide, and people know, you will see that when government wants to burn something close, you have to say, no, please go and look for a deserted place. It's even better. At least before the smoke and everything transcends from that, let me say, okay, they are burning in 9th Mile. Before it circulates to probably somewhere in Ogo, we'll have limited people that will be touched by the effects of that burning of drugs and all of that. So I think much of what we should do should be on the advocacy, while we wait for innovations that will come to help us on this. Having known that this affects women, I'm also advising women to take it very serious. In fact, women are the people who consume all those things more, and yet they have less awareness about it. The code, the what's it called again? What's this ice cream? Cold word. I haven't forgotten. The ice cream, the yogurt, the juice, the Pepsi, the Fanta. It's basically women that consume all these things as well. All the sweets, the sachet, the biscuits, all the chocolate milky things that are very sweet and all of it. They are the ones who consume it the more. And then how many of us segregate, like this one is carton, this one is plastic, this one is nylon. We pack everything into one dustbin and we dispose them like that. So we are still the ones it affected, and we are still the ones that are not managing it properly. We are the ones that cook, and we are still the ones that combine all these things, but every day we're talking about the same thing. So it affects women more, and women should do more about it. I'm talking about my genders on this call. So the bulk of the work lies on us. We educate our family, we send it to our husband and our kids and everyone, right? So I think that's my own contribution. While we are waiting for the great innovation that will come, which probably might come from the Western countries, and maybe a few of us from Africans who are innovative that will come up with something. Let's create more awareness, stop giving out your land for some hazardous activity. Like maybe they don't want to say they want to use this place for depositing of whatever, or burning of whatever. Please don't do. Instead, give out your land for farming so we can even have fresh air to breathe. So this is the awareness we'll be creating, because those people in cross rivers and those Niger deltas, I know why they are giving out those lands is because of poverty and all of that. And to them, they are making money, but it's endangering them. They can't go to farms because when they are cultivating, they are seeing oil. They can't stay comfortable in the house. Everywhere is smoke. Even your clothes you are spreading, everything is smoke. And these are close to people's habitats. But if they are now aware that, okay, this is affecting us, they'll say, they're not giving you. You can go to deserted place and do this, because the truth is that we can't stop burning of fuels entirely. It's going to be a very difficult one. We can't stop it entirely now. So the only thing is that we're going to bring innovations that will help to reduce it too, while we work towards it. That's just the honest truth. So to my fellow gender, we need much work. We are the ones in the kitchen. We are the ones that buy all these things. You buy today with one nylon. Tomorrow you are buying another nylon. You are not even reusing the one you already have. You are buying another one. And then you keep dumping nylon, dumping ice cream cup, dumping these, and they are burning all these things. And it's affecting us back. Now that God said we should go to the world and multiply, I will not come and be having infertility. How will take multiply? So women should create more awareness, extend it to their family members, and be ready to help curb this by segregating this waste and every other thing, and not maybe giving consent to burning of fuels around their habitats or communities and all of that. So, and then I think there's a question somebody asked, where in Enugu can you sell your plastic and other municipal waste that you have? There's a place called Green Axis at ShopRite. That's if you enter ShopRite by the right, that's the side moving towards Park Lane, not the one going as if you're going to GRA, because ShopRite has 2 gates. So at that end, you will see where they are packing plastic. Those people are called Green Axis. They buy plastic, but they buy every municipal waste, like cartons, metals, plastic. They buy them. So you can just take it to those places. They are very effective in Enugu for now. I don't know for other people. I think other people are also working in hand with them, because they have waste baskets in several places. So when it's filled, they pack it. But then they are the ones very effective for now, where you can make money from your waste. So I think that's that from me. This is just thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that contribution. Thank you so much. We have someone raising his hand. Wednesday, Emmanuel. Okay. Please, you can unmute your mic and ask a question or make your contribution. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And it was a pleasure joining the webinar. And to our speakers, thank you very much for the knowledge passed. It was an instructive and an exciting one. I think I will learn a lot. But mine is just more or less a contribution, because I work with an NGO that deals on climate change and sustainable development goals in Abuja, and we've been taking part in issues of climate change. And one thing that is key is that we'll tend to understand that climate crises most times are here to stay. So most times it boils down to how can we humans tend to live with it. Going forward, just with the whole Russian-Ukraine war, we saw most of the global nations going back to coal mining and most of the fossil fuels, which have been lost for gone, and we saw them going back to it. And I think of recent, I hear Enugu State trying to see where they can tap in from their coal mining as a source of resource to the nation. And even with the present government, we saw how some candidates we are referring to climate crisis as not being an issue for Africa. So most times, these slight issues are what we face, and we tend to observe that some of the impacts of climate change are here to stay. So what we NGOs try to do is to find what are the adaptation mechanisms that we can project, that people can, okay, if these things are here to stay, how can we adapt to it? Or how can we live with it without harming ourselves or harming the environment in a bad extent? So I think I was hearing, I didn't hear much of many speakers go towards that dimension, and I wanted to speak and chip into it. Most times, what our NGO does into sensitization of rural women on how they can go into productive or green cooking mechanisms. We go into can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah,
Hello?
we can hear you, sir. Can go on. We can hear you, sir.
All right. We'll go into finding a way to a sustainable cooking mechanisms for women, instead of using the charcoal mechanisms or the cutting down trees to use the firewood, which we know that affects their health in terms of their sight and in terms of the carbon dioxide with the charcoal and the firewood emits. So we'll try as much as possible to teach them sustainable ways of cooking through briquettes, and that's actually a way which they can adapt towards this whole climate issues. Another way is climate smart agriculture. Is another adaptive mechanism, because we actually see what climate change is doing in terms of agriculture and how it's destroying the food system. So I think these people need, what are other ways whereby they can sustain the agricultural mechanisms without necessarily looking out that when government will come to the aid of fighting this climate change, which we don't even know when it will come. So I think these are many more as few sustainable ways of educating the public on adaptive mechanisms. And I believe and I think as climate advocates, we should also key into that part, because climate crisis is here, and I don't think it's going out anytime soon. So we need to devise a means of sustaining ourselves and sustaining the environment for a better future. I know we don't have time. I could have spoken more, but I think maybe when next webinars like this comes off, we'll go key into it. Thank you very much, and I appreciate.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for that wonderful contribution. It is actually critical to what we are discussing here. We appreciate you so much. I think you should be from Lift Humanity Foundation. Right?
Yes.
Hello, sir.
Yes, I'm actually the project manager for Lift Humanity Foundation. Yes.
Oh, okay. It's a pleasure to have you. Our first webinar was actually facilitated by your executive secretary, and he actually shared thoughts with us, and it was actually really, really inspiring. So it's a pleasure to have you, sir. I think we'll actually implement everything you've actually said and see a way to educate people, take this message to our rural communities and tell them what they need to know, because this is actually a fight that we must all, put our hands on deck to face. Thank you so much, everybody. The time is already 10, and it's actually the stoppage time for the webinar. I really appreciate everyone for your time, your energy, and those that presented, our facilitators. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. It was a pleasure to have everyone around. Okay, so at this point, we will call it a day till we meet again our next webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, and to have a lovely night rest.
Thank you.